Now we set the intensity of the backdrop to be more or less physically accurate, but we're not a slave to that. We can set it to be whatever we want in order to get a specific visual effect. So I might choose to set my physical units back down to 1500, which was the default. And in this particular case, with the exposure settings I have, it actually gives me more or less the same brightness values from the original photograph. And that's fine. And I'm pretty happy with the brightness on this. The issue, however, is that the color is not right, because this photograph was taken at about 1 p.m. on a sunny day, and the rendering that we're trying to do here is actually more about 5 p.m. So there's orange light coming in through the window, but yet the backdrop is looking very blue. So we're definitely going to want to color correct that. There's various ways of doing that. One would be to choose one of the other presets over here. Like, for example, I could choose the incandescent filament lamp preset. And let's do a region render of that so we can see the difference sort of in a split screen side by side. So now you see that's much more orange, which is more appropriate to what I've got in terms of the actual lighting. Or I could also go in and plug in a specific value. So if I think that's too orange, maybe instead of incandescent filament, which I happen to know is 2800, maybe I want to choose 3200 degrees Kelvin and see what that looks like. So that's a little bit better, I think, but it's still not really where I want to be. I want to have finer control over this. I want to be able to go in and tweak the red, green, and blue channels separately. So I can do that. 3ds Max makes it really easy. So in order to accomplish that effectively, I'm going to reset this back to D65, and I'm going to drill down into the map parameters. So here's my bitmap. Open that up. And scrolling down, within any bitmap in 3ds Max, there's going to be an output rollout. And we can do things in here like change the brightness and the contrast and so on. But what I really want to do is I want to adjust the curves of the red, green, and blue channels individually. And it works just like the curves adjustment in Photoshop. So to enable it, I'll turn on Enable Color Map here. And you'll see there's two different ways of doing this. We've got mono, which will affect red, green, and blue equally. Or I can go into the RGB mode, and now I've got 3 curves. What I want to do here is I want to add points in order to change the shape of these curves. So over here I've got an Add Points button. But this is going to be a linear point. So what I really want is a Bezier point or a curve point. So I'm going to hold down the button and choose Bezier point. Then I can click to create that Bezier point, and then I can choose the Move tool over here to move these around. Now currently I'm moving all 3 red, green, and blue curves simultaneously. That's not immediately obvious from the interface. What I want to do is I want to turn these curves on and off in order to adjust them separately. So for example, if I wanted to adjust only the red curve, I would turn blue and green off, and you can see there's a ghostly green and blue curve there underneath. So I can do those separately as well. I can say, okay, well, I want less green, and I can turn on blue, and now I can do them all because they're not sitting directly on top of each other. Now the only problem with this is I can't really see the result in my viewport here, so I'm kind of flying blind. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back up, and I'm going to drag this map out to its own slot and choose Instance. So now I got a better sense of what I'm doing. So when I make changes to this instance map, it will be reflected in my self-illuminated material. So you can see already that's looking pretty good as far as what I'm trying to achieve. And I can toggle the Enable button on and off. So yeah, let's give this a shot. I'll go ahead and click Render. And at this point it's looking pretty similar to what I had simply by just changing the color temperature. But I have the freedom to push this in different directions. So I can achieve effects that would be impossible to achieve with just adjusting the color temperature alone. And I'm watching in my sample slot to see what I'm doing. And of course I can also move the points at the end as well. I might want to do these one at a time. Say, oh, well, we don't want green to go up all the way, and or we don't want blue to go up to full intensity either. And so now this is a very warm color with almost purple skies. And in order to see this best, I might want to actually reduce the intensity of the bitmap as well. But this gives you an idea of how you can go about the process of color correction using this output rollout within the bitmap. Finally, there's another way you can do it, which is going to give you even more control. We'll let you do things like change the hue and so on. So I'm going to turn this off. We're back to neutral. And what I'll do is I'll go to the bitmap button here and click it. And this will allow me to essentially stack another map on top of the existing one. And the one I'm looking for is color correction. So I'll double click that and I get a pop-up asking me, do you want to discard the old map or do you want to keep the old map as a sub-map? And certainly we want to keep the old map. What this will do is then apply the color correction to the existing map. Click OK. Here we go. We've got the color correction map. And we can do all kinds of cool things in here. Like I said, we can adjust the hue. We could put, an alien landscape out there. Or we could correct for if there was an error in the original image acquisition. Set that back to 0. Or we could adjust saturation up or down just globally. And finally, we can go down into the advanced settings and do all kinds of fancy stuff, like gamma correct this image directly here. So I could say, oh, well, I want to make it more contrasty and darker, so I could lower the gamma to something like 0.7. And now it's much darker and more contrasty. Let's see what that gives me. So you can see what's happened here is by bringing the gamma down, now I've got a richer color in the sky here, but an overall general lightness of about the same. So I could bring this down even further, maybe 0.45, which is actually a magic number which is inverting the gamma of the image. Maybe that's too dark, but I can also, play around with it all day long. So those are different ways that you can color correct a background image so that you can get the artistic effect that you want to achieve.